Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Today we're going to finish this lure. This is the super deep diving lure that I'm hoping that it's a super deep diving lure that we started in the last episode, where I talked about the design parameters, the specifics of the shape of the body. I showed you how I set the angle of the lip, and we talked a little bit about what all those things were going to do for a deep dive. And for those of you who were waiting for me to do the weight and balance on this, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to show you how I calculate it. But first, I have to have all the components, right? I got to have that dive bib that I'm going to make out of this piece of aluminum, because this is going to have some substantial part of the weight. So let's come up with a shape for the dive bib. So I like to get started on just a blank piece of thick paper. And so I know a lot of you guys are going to ask me, are there any rules for sort of the length of the lip? And of course, there's going to be limitations. The longer the lip, the greater the influence that lip is going to have on the action and on how stable the lure is going to be. So while I can't give you any absolute specifics, the size of the lip really can be pretty large actually before it starts to become a little unstable. Now on the lures that I make with large bibs, I like to keep it around 1/3 the length of the body. So this body is about 14 centimeters, which is about 5.5 inches. And that's right at 2 inches. Now it's a matter of what kind of shape it's going to have. Now, in the past, I've really liked using this tombstone shape. It seems to be pretty stable and it's an easy shape to make. But I'm going to make one that's got a semi-rounded bill. And I want to make sure that my aspect ratio, the length to the width, is somewhere close to 2:1. So I'm going to set this thing out to about 1 inch. And I'm going to go ahead and draw this in. Now, I can, if I don't like the shape, I can always refine it a little bit. It's not that big a deal. This is the very back of the slot. I'm going to kind of back curve it in from right about there. So I'm pretty happy with that shape. And if you can imagine that in there, that's going to be a pretty pronounced lip. So the next step that I do is to fold this right on the center line. And a good way to make that accurate is to really score in the line with the pen, and it'll weaken the paper and it'll fold there more naturally. And there you go. That's going to be a pretty aggressive dive lip. We'll see how that works. All right, I'm going to use this little double-sided roll-on tape, and I'll put it on the aluminum. I like to take this and glue it on to a piece of wood before I cut it out on the bandsaw. All right, this time I'm going to use a little piece of PVC board, because I have it laying around and I couldn't find a thin enough piece of wood. And that just makes it easier to hold on to this thing while I'm pushing it through the bandsaw. You can see the shine on the edge. That's because I cut it a little big, and I'll refine the shape on the belt sander. There you go. Now I have this nice and square, and I have the aluminum right up to the lines on my template, so that should work out pretty well. But if you look right here, you're going to see that I've made some scribbly marks there. They're actually where I'm going to drill a couple of holes, and my intention is to make the tie-on eye out of this little area here. Little bit of grinding and smoothing here, and I think this will come out pretty clean. But before I get too far along, we really got to consider the weight and balance of this lure. What I want from it is for it to just barely float. Not exactly suspending, but slow floating. And so we're going to have to do a little bit of calculation to come up with the amount of weight I need to add to it, if any, because this plate is a lot of weight. So let's go to the dry erase board. All right, because I used this kind of wood before, in fact, I use it to make this big swim bait, I already know what the density of this wood is because I always do a measurement of the density of the wood I'm going to use because it comes in handy right now. So the density of the wood is 0.67 grams per cubic centimeter. And I weighed the body of the lure as it is right now, and it weighs 19.34 grams. So if I divide that weight by the density, I get 28.9 cubic centimeters. That's the volume of the lure. So that means when the lure gets immersed in the water, it displaces exactly the same volume as the body of the lure. And so that means the buoyant force, I know this is nerdy stuff, the buoyant force is 28.9 grams because water weighs 1 gram per cubic centimeter. So if we round up to 29 grams, that would be the theoretical maximum weight for the lure and all the hardware for it to still be just barely suspending. But I know from experience that that theoretical amount is usually too little to make the lure actually start to sink. So typically you can get your lure to suspend or just slowly float at about 15% more than the weight you calculate. Now that's probably due to the finish of the lure because often you're adding a lot of volume in clear coats. And clear coats typically are right about the same weight as water, a little bit heavier actually. But the thing is the clear coat encases a lot of air bubbles. So in the end, it actually adds a little bit of flotation. 29 times 1.15, 33.35 grams. So that's going to be the maximum weight I want on this lure. So just by absolute chance, the total weight of this stuff is 33.29 grams. I think we're going to leave it just like that. We don't need to add any weight, and hopefully it'll have a good action without having any weight in the body. All right, so I've got this thing pretty much smoothed out so I can be sure I can get a split ring on this thing. And now I'm just going to take this 4/0 steel wool and just smooth it out everywhere, and then I'll take it to the polishing wheel. I'm using some polishing compound for, it's just regular car polishing compound. And I don't know if you can see that, but I even managed to polish the edge. All right, so I'm going to do one more experiment, and I really like doing experiments like this in public, even if they go wrong. But if this does go sideways, don't destroy me in the comments, please. You know how when you paint a lure with a bib like this, you can tape off the bib and then you get that straight line when the paint on the bib in the back? Well, I'm not that big fan of that. I prefer to have the bib with no paint on it at all. And you can accomplish that by not putting the bib on before you paint. But I have to have that bib on. Here's what I'm going to do. I've taken and taped off the front of the lure where the slot is and cut the slot out of the tape. I'm covering the majority of the bib in the blue painter's tape, but the experimental sort of trick here is I'm going to slide this in place and then I'm going to spray the exposed part of the metal bib with some of this Plasti Dip. And the idea is it'll form a mask that'll be perfectly contoured to the shape of the head of the lure, and then after I paint it I can just peel this stuff off as if it were tape. Hopefully it works. We've had a bunch of rain lately. Went away for last weekend and came back to the lake completely out of its banks. It rose like 1.5 feet vertically. All right, that should do it. Let's let it dry. Now you might look at this little tail hook hanger and think that it can't be very well embedded. You can see it's about 1.25 inches deep, and I just need to glue it in with some 2-part resin. And I'm twisting up these hook hanging highs from just some leader wire. This is 174-pound wire. And just as a reminder, everything that I use, all the tools and all the materials I use in these videos, I try to find good Amazon links for them, and I put them in the description. So scroll way down in the description and you might find what you're looking for. I try to find good links that have like worthwhile prices to buy online. Alright, I'm going to let that set for a while, and then I'm going to come back and drill some holes for some pins. Alright, so now to fasten this thing in here, I'm going to use this, this wire right here, and I'll cut some small pieces off to form pins. Alright, so there's the two little pins cut, and it's better to cut them a little too short than a little too long. And to make sure it's going to stay in there, I'm going to put a little tiny drop of crazy glue on there. Alright, then I'll fill the rest of the hole with a little bit of UV resin. Alright, it's nicely sanded down and smooth. I'm going to wipe it down with alcohol again, and we're off to the paint booth. This is going to be my color palette for this thing. I'm going to have white as a base and probably leave white on the belly. And then I'm going to paint it violet and orange. And let me show you why. Alright, so this is my little ultraviolet light. And there's a bunch of pins in there with all different colors. And if you take a look at what happens to the color of the pins when I turn the light on, you can see that some of them glow and some of them just get dull. You can see the reds just get dull. And these bright ones, those are actually violet and orange, and that's what I'm going to paint. And the reason I think that might make a difference is because this lure is supposed to dive really deep, and the deeper you go, the more colors get filtered out by the water, starting really quickly with typically with red and yellow, but the light that travels the deepest into the water is ultraviolet. So any color that actually reflects ultraviolet will show up much better at deeper depths. So that's the theory. I don't know if it'll make any difference. First things first, let's go ahead and paint this thing white. Alright, now I'm going to hit it on the bottom with a little bit of the Createx pearlized white. Alright, now I'm going to switch to this Ghost Tint Fresh Blood. It's actually a very light violet, and I'm going to work my way from the top down. Alright, now I'm going to create a little bit of a scale pattern between the darker violet and the lighter violet. So it should be pretty subtle. Alright, now I've got the orange in there, and I'm going to use this little bit of a sort of tiger stripe pattern. Alright, this doesn't look too dramatic until you do this. That looks pretty cool, look at that. Alright, I'm going to take a little bit of transparent black and darken the top just a bit. about 3/4 of the way back. And I'm going to put a dark spot right here for the eye. And now I'm going to put just a bit of pearlescent red on the chin. Alright, that's looking pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and put some eyes on it and then spray some polyacrylic just as a mid coat between the paint and the clear coat. I'll let it set for a few hours and then I'll clear coat it. Alright, so I was looking for a set of eyes with some orange in them, but this is the closest thing I can find. Now it's just a matter of putting the polyacrylic on it and putting a clear coat on it. And I won't bore you with that, so next time you see this, it'll be clear coated and done, and we'll be looking for a window to take this thing out to the lake. Alright, it's been a couple hours. I'm hoping we got a good finish. It's looking pretty nice. As much as I bashed this paint job because I nicked it in a few spots, but it looks pretty good. Let's see what it looks like under the UV light. That is so cool. I just love that effect. Alright, so I'm going to put some hooks on it, and we've got a really sunny day. Let's go out to the big lake and see what this monster can do. I have to say, of all the lures I've ever made, this is probably the one that I had the least confidence in as far as having it be controllable. And I have to say, this bill looks bigger every time I handle the lure. I don't know why, it just keeps growing. Well, let's see if we can get a final weight with the hooks on there. See that? 34.14. So it's a little heavier than what we designed for. But that's because of the extra weight from the paint and eyes and clear coat. Let's go ahead and toss it in the little tank and see what it does. Okay, nothing to it but to drop it in there. Slow rising, that's what I was hoping for. Perfect. See that? That's exactly what I wanted. Alright, so now we can take it fishing. Alright, we're at the lake. And I'm a little disappointed the water's really high. Visibility, the clarity is just dismal. It looks like green tea. It's pretty bad. So hopefully I can get some shots where you can see it from the surface. And we'll try underwater stuff, but we'll definitely troll it at a, casting distance out and check the bottom of the dive on this thing and see at what point will it stop hitting bottom. I had planned to put a split ring on this thing, but I'm just gonna use my typical arrangement with a quick clip, and I think it'll go on there. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous too. I'm not sure this thing is gonna work at all, but it'll be fun putting this thing in there. Look at the size of that bill. That's just crazy. And the flash on this thing. All right, let's see what this thing's gonna look like. Well, it just floats. Look at that. Oh man, that thing rockets to the bottom. I barely pulled it and it went down 1.5 feet. Look at that. Heck yeah. It looks like there's somebody underwater with a spotlight. Oh yeah. There's no way we can see this very well. Let's see how it casts. Okay, that was a little wacky, but it's against the wind. And let's see if it retrieves. And you can see that the line just dropping in the water. It's definitely, hit bottom there. It's about 9 feet right here. So that little, yeah, it's on the bottom right now. Oh, had to pull it out of the grass. Ooh, it's still hitting bottom. Look at that. That's more than 9 feet. That's probably 12 feet there. And if you wanted proof that it's hitting bottom. All right, so the next thing to do is to get out into a little deeper water. Let's try, I don't know, we'll try 15 feet. All right, we're at about the 14-foot contour. Let's see if we can get it to hit bottom here. That's about a 15-yard cast. That's not very good. But let's see what happens. Man, it's just diving for the bottom. There it is. It's hitting bottom right there. Ooh, oh yeah, it's on the bottom right there. Dang, look at that. That was all the way on the bottom. That's easy 15 feet. Oh yeah, this thing's really cranking to the bottom. We're gonna have to just troll it. All right, we'll call that 20 feet. And I know it gets deeper as we move in this direction. And I'm gonna cast this thing out just a little ways, just to make sure that it's not fouled. I'm just gonna let out enough line that I know it's a normal trolling distance, which I'm gonna call that around 25 to 30 yards. And I'm gonna stick it in this thing, and then we'll just watch the rod. Yeah, there it is, it's on the bottom. And we're in 20 feet. All right, this is 26 and it's getting deeper as we go, so let's go ahead and toss it out here. All right, let's see if we can get it to hit bottom. There it is. It's on the bottom now. There it is. It didn't take long. But look at the angle. Look at the angle of attack. Well, I don't know if you can see it, but the angle of attack of that it's just scraping the bottom right now. The angle of attack on this thing is so steep. It just goes to show you how powerful that bib is. There's actually grass way down there. All right, I'm hooking up my little GoPro Session and I'm gonna connect it using this gizmo to my power pole, and I'll ease it down just a couple of feet in the water, and hopefully we can get some underwater shots. All right, I'm not sure how good that underwater footage is going to be, so if it's worth posting, it'll be right after this. If you're enjoying these kind of videos, subscribe and hit that thumbs up. It really helps out. Try fishing the toothbrush swim bait, and I'll see you guys next Friday.